suggested by winners and losers. The recent Frank Bruno-Mike Tyson heavyweight championship in Las Vegas was a multi-million-pound extravaganza which attracted a worldwide television audience. But would the fight ever have gone ahead had it not been for the vast amount of money put up by the television networks? And should British television bow to a strong body of medical opinion which says that boxing should be banned altogether? For Bruno, 5 rounds in Vegas amounted to the biggest payday of his career. I'm joined by ITV boxing commentator Reg Gutteridge, former world middleweight champion Alan Minter, and neuropathologist Dr. Helen Grant. Now let's tackle first the case that boxing is dangerous. Now, Dr. Grant, is it true, the BMA says that, never mind a knockdown, never mind a concussion, that one punch to the head will cause permanent brain damage to a boxer? Is that right?
Well, if it's hard enough, it certainly will, yes.
But is that the problem?
No, I don't think that's the problem. I think the problem is that you get brain damage from the cumulative effects of a lot of punches over the course of time.
And you can actually see this damage when autopsies are done, can you, of boxers' brains?
Well, you see the damage after the autopsy is done when you examine the brain. Partly with the naked eye and partly under the microscope you see the damage.
But look, we have Alan Minter sitting in the studio here, who is a bright and intelligent chap. Henry Cooper is very familiar to a lot of people. How do you explain that they're perfectly okay if the case is that they will suffer damage?
Well, not everybody does suffer damage, just like not everybody who smokes heavily dies of cancer of the lung. There are exceptions. It's not known why that is, though I think probably the reason is that their brains fit more tightly inside their skulls, and therefore they don't wobble about so much when their skulls are made to move rapidly from side to side.
Right. Alan Minter, I don't know whether you reject the medical evidence from Helen Carter or from the BMA. When you went into a boxing career, did you know the dangers? Were you aware of them?
Well, I can just say that as a junior boxer, that's a lad of 12, 14, so then you turn senior about 15, you don't take too much notice of the risk of the dangers in boxing. It's when you become like a professional, then you get older, you get wiser, and you think, well, yes, it is a dangerous sport, and we know that boxing is dangerous.
Do you accept it is?
Absolutely. But so is every physical contact sport, a risk. But we all train accordingly. We all know the risk element. And we believe that if you're 100% fit and you're right to take the fight in progress, then you'll be okay. Right.
Well, Reg Gutteridge, is boxing any more than a legalized way of inflicting grievous bodily harm? I mean, people want it banned. What is your answer to them?
Well, I suppose, yes, if you argue that way, you probably would say it was legalised mayhem, if nothing else. Well, I would disagree with the banning. They've been doing this since a fellow called James Figg, an Oxfordshire swordsman, I think that was in 1790, the abolitionist, have tried to stop boxing. You either run in life or you fight, don't you, really? And I think it's the natural instinct. And I think what people don't realise is the opportunity that it does give a great deal of boys. We got one here with Alan Minter. With all respects, Alan would have probably made foreman plasterer by now, and instead of that he made something of himself and made some money and all that kind of thing. So from that risk alone, I think it may be worth it. As you said, Henry Cooper, Frank Bruno, who's admitted that he would probably have been in trouble with the law by now, has become a millionaire over it. So in some respects, if I had the physique and had the ability, I think I might have tried it as well, although I do come from a boxing family.
But are we not haunted by the ghost of Muhammad Ali and Joe Louis, who did seem to deteriorate very badly?
Oh, I'm glad you mentioned Joe Louis. It's one of my pet subjects. He had 2 heart attacks, he had a pacemaker, he had a stroke, and he lived about 10 years longer than a normal person would have lived with that. They've never actually proved to me that that was a punch-drunk situation.
Right, let me just match you. Let us join Dr. Geoffrey Cundy, who's of the BMA, anti-boxing campaigner. Presumably, in your mind, Doctor, you're quite clear the reason why you want boxing banned.
Oh, very definitely. The whole aim of boxing is to stop your opponent's brain functioning. And when you do this, as Helen Grant has said, you cause damage to the brain, which builds up, is cumulative. And in studies which have been done have shown that about 15 to 20% of boxers completing a professional career develop the punch-drunk syndrome eventually.
Is there a slight worry that the BMA here is becoming, well, political, and that it's launching a campaign against the sport? I mean, why not tackle national hunt racing, where I gather many more people are killed than in boxing?
We're not saying that you should ban all dangerous sports simply because people get injuries or even get killed in them. But what we're saying is that boxing is unique in that the aim is to damage your opponent's brain and indeed to kill your opponent, as has happened to 12 boxers since the war in Britain.
That's very chilling stuff, that the aim is to damage the brain, if not kill them.
Well,
I'd
it
rather
happens
Alan
to be
answer
true.
that one, by the way.
Sorry?
I think Alan should answer that one.
Right.
I find that outrageous.
Alan?
Yeah, it's a terrible the way the doctor's just come across saying that. A fighter, a boxer, doesn't go in the ring with intention to give someone brain damage. A fighter, like any other sportsman, goes into the ring because he wants to be a winner. And there's two guys there that are 100% physically fit.
But Alan, surely, I mean, the aim is actually to knock the guy out, preferably, isn't it?
The aim is to get rid of the opponent as quick as possible, but
Yeah.
the aim is not to give someone brain damage. I mean, there's two sides, really. All you want to do is to go in there and win, like the opponent wants to go in there and beat me.
Yes.
Well, boxing is about inflicting cerebral damage. The purpose of the exercise is to knock your opponent out, if possible, at all events, to score as many points as can be achieved by hitting him, preferably to the head.
And in doing so, you will damage that chap's brain.
In doing so, you will damage the chap's brain. He doesn't only get damaged by being knocked out, which is concussion. He gets damaged by all the other blows in all the other bouts.
Right.
And over a period of time, that will leave him with a brain which ultimately will shrink, and he will then become demented. Of course, you don't hear much about them because they tend to fade away into mental hospitals, and people don't want to know or advertise the fact.
Dr. Cundy, could I be clear, do you want to ban amateur as well as professional boxing?
Yes, because we do believe that there are risks to the amateur boxers, as you will appreciate from the death of a 15-year-old boxer 2 years ago. What is encouraging is that the number of amateur boxers had dropped by 1/3 in the last 10 years. So we think our message that young boys are too young to assess the risks and choose sensibly whether they should fight is actually getting through to parents.
Bob, I make a point there, if I may. The Olympic Games had the highest number of competitors ever this year, so I think that might defeat that argument if we're talking about worldwide. And
But
I'm not sure he's correct about the third either, actually.
But taking his point, are you not concerned
Can I ask also
about the
whether,
health of young boxers?
Of course. I mean, I feel it terrible, and I cringe at times, and I hate the eye injuries that they often suffer. Alan used to bleed quite a bit at times over the eyes. Can I ask something, and maybe Dr. Grant can tell me, is this the whole of the BMA at saying this, or just part of the BMA?
Well, they had a committee looking into it in 1984 because they were anxious about it, and the official view of the BMA as a body now is that boxing should be banned.
That is the body as a whole answering his question.
That is the body as a whole. The BMA, that is what the BMA stands for. That
He
view.
had the impression this was a coterie of activists rather than
This is
representing...
the official BMA policy. And in fact, I remember not
Right.
very long ago, John Dawson was on television saying that was the policy. John Dawson is one of the secretaries of the BMA, but that was the policy, and saying why, and showing why.
We're going to go up at this moment to Natalie in the boxing gymnasium in Glasgow, where I gather someone wants to enter this particular debate.
That's right, Bob. Yes, a lot of angry people here who've been listening to the doctor's comments. Can I just ask you, Steve, you're a young professional boxer. Does sport come into it at all?
The sport come into...
Boxing?
Yeah, oh, yeah, there's sport. I mean, after we do, 8 rounds, 10 rounds, I mean, we're the best of friends.
So it's not just bashing someone
no,
or trying
if
to
it
give
was
them brain
bashing,
damage?
Damaging brains, we'd stand in there, taking swipes at each other.
I must say,
It's-
you look, you know, particularly unmarked, and so does Alan Minter. Is that
Right.
the mark of a good boxer, that you
It's
don't...
defensive skills, yeah.
Defensive skills. You've been a trainer for a long time.
Yes.
You've been listening to what the doctor's saying. Would you agree?
Certainly not, no. I mean...
But there is an element
there
of
is an
damage,
element of risk,
isn't
but
there?
I've seen more punch-drunk rugby players than I have boxers. So why aren't they on in rugby? You know, I mean, these people, they're taking a risk going hang gliding or they're playing squash. How many people die with heart attacks playing squash?
Well, let's get a woman's point of view. Margaret's known as the Queen of Boxing here in Glasgow. Margaret, is it a sport for young boxers?
Yes, I would say that, because nowadays all the boys who's running about the streets, glue sniffing, drugs, etc., gives them discipline. It's a family affair. And there's none of the boys over the years that I've been
So do you think it's better that they're training here in the gym rather than being out on the streets?
Yes, running the streets.
So
Yes,
family
I do.
sport?
Yes, it is a family sport.
Alex, can I come to you, because you were a boxer before you turned promoter. Would you say that in your time you've seen people who've been badly damaged?
I've seen people who've showed signs of boxing. They've been professional boxers or amateur boxers.
And but that didn't put you off. You're now promoting and
no.
managing them.
It might put me off when I'm no longer in boxing.
And you're what, 73, and you were a boxer?
73 years, mostly army boxing.
But you're not all saying here today that you haven't seen anybody who's been damaged by the
And
sport.
years ago, yes, but not so many times now, because a boxer today attains a standard of fitness and is watched so very carefully by the promoters and the trainers to ensure that there's no damage done unduly.
And the medical profession as well.
The medical profession, there's always at least 2 doctors present.
So general consensus of opinion here seems to be that boxing has improved over the years, Bob.
Well, I have to tell you, Natalie, throughout that, Dr. Carter was just kind of shaking her head and is it because your message, you can't get your message through? I mean...
I think it is that the message is difficult to get across. Young boxers are not aware of the risks. They think the risk is that you're going to get a bad bleed immediately after or during a boxing bout. That's a very unusual state of affairs. The risk really is that over a period of time, after you've given up professional boxing, gradually your brain will shrink from the scars it has sustained, and you will gradually go demented.
So sadly, you're saying that young Alan Minter here, in the fullness of time,
Well, he may
is
do.
likely to...
Well, not likely. I mean, it isn't known what the percentage is, but it's possible.
It's possible.
But you've just said there's a lot of them in mental homes, Dr.
That's absolutely true.
Well, yeah, but you could also find people from all walks of life in those mental homes,
Yes, but
including broadcasters.
but they haven't been deliberately given cerebral damage.
You keep on about this deliberate thing all the time. So
Well, it is
does the
deliberate.
brain know any difference in rugby, whether it's been injured or not, or in national hunt or in motor racing? It's still a death in a family or a brain damage, but you're saying it's only deliberate in boxing.
Well,
but what difference does it make if they're injured?
The difference is that
Alan,
in boxing...
Sorry.
If I can just interrupt, to all the amateurs and pros that are listening now, is that I've had at least 150 amateur fights. I've had 90-odd professional fights in the division, the middleweight division, where they're the greatest punchers in the world. And I fought the best in the world and the greatest athletes in the middleweight division. And I'm okay, I'm 100%.
Yes, but you're saying he's jolly lucky.
Well, he may very well be an exception. Indeed, why is he sitting here speaking so clearly?
Right.
He is an exception.
We have a call, actually.
Not an exception.
We have a
There are
call
lots like him.
for Alan Minter. And I apologize for not getting many calls in, but you will see the discussion in Glasgow and here has generated a life of its own. Tom Elliott, what would you like to say to Alan Minter?
Yes, hello, Alan.
All right, Tom.
Many years ago, this is only my experience of boxing, it was a bit of amateur stuff, army stuff, you know. And this, I fought the finals of the Central Mediterranean Forces in Malta, 1946.
Yes, can I bring you
Now,
to the point, Tom? I'm
yes,
sorry, we're very pressed for time.
Well, I'm just trying to give him a quickie there. And what it is, I think I took one of the biggest hidings in the history of boxing, you know. But the point was, I was going down on the floor, I was getting up, he was knocking us down again, I was getting up again, knocking us down again, this and that. And the question I want to ask you is there anything known in the boxing world that, you know, I didn't know I was getting up. And I've seen a lot of boxers since then, you know, like the Tyson, the way he knocks these fellas, and you can see them struggling to get on their feet, What is the instinct that makes you want to get on your back on your feet and take another bloody hiding, you know? You obviously can...
yeah.
If you're taking a hiding, you stay on the floor. But with a good fighter and a lot of pride, you get up, because there's nothing worse than being tapped on the chin, go on the floor. It's very embarrassing. So you keep getting up. Obviously, if you're getting hurt, you stay down.
Alan, while we still got you, something we have not covered and were meant to, because our discussion has, as I said, just generated a life of itself. Would the Bruno-Tyson match have happened were it not for the pressures of television and all the money involved? Surely it was a mismatch. Would it have happened?
Of course. I mean, but boxing have the greatest viewing figures of all time. Now, forget about television. It would have completely sold out no matter where it would have been on. Wembley Stadium, anywhere in the world, it would have been a sellout, because it was a must fight. The heavyweight champion of the world is the biggest draw in sport. Yes, it would have happened.
It would have happened,
oh, yeah.
Irrespective
Bob,
of
you see,
television.
the point is that we had the $1 million gate between Dempsey and Carpentier right back in the 20s, I should say. So they were drawing big money those days without television. Admittedly, it's trebled, quadrupled, whatever the amount today, of course. I accept. But I think, yes, it would have taken place, but the boxers would have earned a lot less money. That's what you're really saying.
A last word, almost in a word, Doctor. You'd be happy, would you, if television stopped covering boxing?
Well, it would be a beginning.
Right. Thank you all very much indeed for joining us. Sorry about many of the calls we couldn't fit in. Michael, we're going to hear about the poll, I think.